Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome from overseas. It's obviously very, very late, so I don't expect too many people to be tuning in live because it'd be really late in the States now, and also in the UK it's very, very early in the morning. So hopefully a few of you will tune in. I've just had one Keylight Digitals here. They said they could hear me all fine. I was just doing some tests a second ago. That'll be cut out if you're watching this later on. So yeah, I wanted to talk to you today about how I've been finding the GH5. Now, I'm only through the initial testing stage at this stage, so I am going to put up a more extensive review as I've gone on with more weddings and stuff. At the moment here in Australia, it's middle of winter, so the wedding season basically has died off for me. It starts again in another month for me. So I'll then have more videos to show you how I'm going to be using these two cameras together. Now, my intention is to actually use both cameras together, so in no way am I dumping Sony, but I was a little bit frustrated in waiting for, say, something that was going to replace the basically the A7S II. Now, I'm not sure how this is going to go in that respect with ISO, and I'll talk about those things before, but there's some things, as I'm getting more into vlogging and other things, I wanted a more dedicated video camera, and I thought what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to use both cameras in together. That I'm going to be using the A6500 and the GH5 together. So I'll talk about how I'm going to do that as this talk goes on. So I'm certainly in no way dumping Sony, but I am intending to use both cameras extensively together for my wedding productions. Now, most of you who have followed me know that I'm doing Fusion now an awful lot, and it's been one of the major things where my company has grown. Because I can offer the photography and also the videography at the same time, it's really been a benefit for promoting my business, and often it's the main reason why the brides will hire me, because they don't have to hire a separate videographer. I'm not replacing a full-on videographer though. I'm only giving a 3 to 5 minute highlight. If they need any more than that, well then obviously they then have to go and hire a full-on videographer because I'm not interested in doing that side of it. I'm just actually interested in giving this beautiful movie sort of highlight reel of their day, and I really love doing it, and I'm having an awful lot of fun doing it as well. Often I'm holding two cameras at the same time, so it is me that does it. I do hire someone though to carry the gear, because if I'm doing Fusion, I'm doing video and stills at the same time, I have to have someone to lug the extra gear around, so that's one extra thing that I have to do. So guys, if you are watching, just say hi, because we can have some questions as this goes along as well. But what I wanted to talk to you about is, well, we'll start off with why I actually bought the GH5. So I'm going to talk about that as well. And there's some issues there that I sort of thought, well, the GH5 will fit my needs. I used to have the GH4. When I shot Nikon, I had the Nikon cameras, and the GH4 was for the video side of it. But when I basically got a little bit frustrated with the way Nikon were not adding new features, and their video side of it when I sold it was not very good at all. So I decided to move to Sony, and that gave me the great benefit of having the stills and also the video at the same time. But over the last 12 months, as I've been getting more and more into video, there's just some niggling things about the Sony that have niggled me a little bit. So I thought, well, I might try and get the GH5 now to see if I can use that over the next 6 to 12 months. Sony may release a camera that does fix all of these issues that I'll be talking to you about, the advantages, and if that's the case, well then I may even sell the GH5 and go back to Sony. I don't know yet, or I might just keep using the Sony, because I'm really happy with what the GH5 is giving me for the video side of it, and I'm still learning, so you know, we'll talk about that as we go on. So when you're watching this, whatever you do, don't treat me as a videographer. I'm not. I'm talking about this from a person that's doing Fusion. So I'm talking about this from a person that's doing the stills and the videography at the same time. In no way am I trying to compete with a full-on videographer. But let's look at the cameras anyway. So that's basically why I decided to change over, was because there were some things in the GH5 that were just lacking in my Sony cameras, but in some ways I'm also going to be using the Sony cameras as well, so that in no way am I not going to be using this even still for video, and I'll be talking about those things as well as we move on with this discussion. But I'll talk to you initially about what I love about the GH5. So let's just put the A6500 just to the side for the moment, and I'll talk to you about what I love about the GH5, because for starters, one of the things that was really frustrating me about the Sony systems was not having that articulating screen, because I do love the ability to turn that screen around and point it back at me if I'm doing some vlogging or something like that. That's one of the things I just don't understand why Sony aren't releasing that, and it really frustrates me. I'm hoping that the next A6-700 or whatever they call it will actually have that. So chime in too whether you think that that is a thing that frustrates you a little bit about the Sony system, but I really do wish that it had that. The weight of this camera is definitely heavier than what my A6-500 is, but if you take the lenses into account, they probably balance out a little bit, because, for instance, if we're dealing with this lens here, this is the 45, I think it's the 42.5 1.7 lens that I just got. This lens is, well, equivalent on a full frame to around an 85. So the lenses are tiny on the Micro Four Thirds system. So probably in the end, the weights balance themselves out. So I'm not worried about that. And to be honest, I actually quite like the feel of both of these cameras in my hand. I really have no issue with either camera if you're talking about that side of it. But there's some things where the GH5 is way ahead, and I'll talk about those. And there's some things where the A6-500 is way ahead as well. So we'll talk about those as well. But clearly, I'll talk about the things that I love about this. The button layout is incredible on these. There's buttons everywhere on this camera that you can actually use and map to do different things, and I've found that that's incredibly good to be able to do that, because you can just program anything, even the front buttons down here. There's multiple buttons on the back that you can use all through here. There's buttons everywhere. The LCD screen at the back is much better than what the Sony A6-500 does, because with the A6-500, when you're shooting 4K, the screen dims really badly, and you can't use that in daylight. It's actually really, really poor. Whereas the A6-500, it's still not amazing to see in daylight, but you can actually still see it. The difference in daylight is amazing, and when I do a full review of this, I'll show you how this actually works. But yeah, the screen, this display on the back is so much better than what the Sony is offering. Another great thing too is the dual card slots are also amazing. I mean, that's a great feature to have. And they also are hot swappable, which is incredible. So basically, if you're recording video on one, and then when that fills up, it'll record to the second one, the light flashes actually on the cards to show you which camera is which card is actually being used. You can actually hot swap them between and immediately go to the second card, so you would never run out. The only thing you'll run out with is battery. So that's another great feature. Another area too where this excels is battery time. It runs about 2 hours or even a bit longer than that if you're recording, which is incredible. Another thing that I really was getting frustrated with was the slow motion on the Sony cameras. I really shoot a lot of 4K now, and I was getting a little bit frustrated that I couldn't do 4K 60, and I'm hoping that the new Sony cameras that are released actually release that, and they come out with the 4K 60. This will do 4K 60 internally, and it will also do 10-bit internally. So that's another really good thing as well. And I believe there's going to be an update coming up soon which will give you 400 megabits recording in this. That's a future update coming up apparently the end of the US summer. So it must be going to come out fairly soon. Another thing where this excels as well is the weather sealing. This is really, really reliable. From what I've seen on the reviews online, you can basically use this if it is raining outside, whereas my Sony gear, I'm always a bit hesitant doing weddings and stuff if it's raining, because the weather sealing is, I wouldn't trust it in a downpour, whereas I've seen these actually being used in downpours, and I think the weather sealing on this is rated much better. And you can actually feel that when you look at all of the covers that cover everything. They're really solidly done with rubber seals and things like that, so it seems to be sealed really, really well. So let's talk about now some of the things that I like about this, and then we'll go through the A6-500 and I'll talk about that. So basically, this has better colours. It hasn't got better colours than the Sony, but it's got better colours than when I use my GH4. So they have improved that. They've also improved the megapixel. It's now, I'm just reading off of notes I've put down here, it's now over 20 megapixels inside. There's no AF filter on this where there was on the GH4, and that's another reason why I wasn't very happy with the GH4. The stabilization on this is incredible. And I'm just going to switch over to this because I'll play you this because this was all handheld. Let's have a look. I just did this the other day, so don't worry about it. I just filmed it when we were walking. But I thought I'd try this all handheld and I was shooting slow motion. This was done at 4K 60p. And basically I shot this in Vlog. So this was recorded in Vlog and it's all handheld. There was no gimbals used here at all. So I thought it was incredible. Even here, this is all handheld. You can see there's a little bit of wobble there, but even this was handheld. So I think it's sort of a game changer in that respect that you could get by without using any sort of stabilization. This is the slow-mo image that was done. Now this was at the 180, so it is a little bit soft. I found the 180 frames per second is a bit soft, but the 120 is actually really, really good. And it slows it down in the camera, so when you bring it back into the timeline, the images are actually already in slow motion for you. So, you know, it's actually great. So that side of it, the stabilization of this camera is really a major step up on what I was using on the Sony cameras. It's amazing. It's not quite as good as what the Olympus has, but still it works really, really well. And it does give me the ability to, if I'm running and gunning and things like that, I don't have to be using a gimbal or even a monopod or something like that. I mean, clearly I'll still use them, but as I think I get better at it, and I've got a fairly steady hand, it's going to be a real advantage for that. So that's a really interesting thing that it's actually coming up with. Also, if you have non-stabilized lenses, like some of the lenses I've bought aren't stabilized, they'll still be stabilized because they are stabilized in the camera. Again, the A6500 has that, but the GH5 takes it to another level. It is much better than what the Sony A6500 has, and that's probably too something to do with the sensor size as well, because the sensor is a lot smaller. It's probably a lot easier for it to move around and balance for that movement. So the Dual IS is amazing. I did buy the new lenses that support Dual IS, and that's why I was getting those lovely smooth results that were coming through there as well. The ISO, I've found that you can easily use this up to 1600 ISO, and the results are really, really good in my testing. And like I said, I will show some of these results as I start to use the camera in real life. So I will show examples of this. I just wanted to give you a talk today. But the ISO up to 1600 is really, really good with very minimal noise in the shadows. You can use it up to 3200, I've found, and it's still acceptable, but I wouldn't go above 3200 at all with this sensor. But that's clearly an awful lot better than what I was getting with the GH4, which I couldn't really go past 800. So they have improved the sensor an awful lot with this, but 1600 is ample. And to be honest, I'm using lighting anyway now. In most of my weddings, I'm actually carrying continuous lighting, so I am lighting up the things that I need to do. So if it's dark, I'm adding light in. So basically running at 1600 is not an issue for me anymore. So that's really not a problem. Like I said, it does have the 10-bit 422 internal, which is fantastic, and it will do 4K 60p internal as well, which again is unbelievable. So I can then take that into Final Cut and slow it down to when I'm using 24p, and I can slow it down 50%, and I have that lovely slow motion, which you just can't do with the Sony cameras. So that's also a great thing. It has got Vlog, which those images I showed you at the beginning from that video there were shot with Vlog. So this was all shot with Vlog here, if we go back. It gives you around about 12 stops of dynamic range, and that's nowhere near as good as what you're getting with the Sony cameras, but it's acceptable for what I'm going to be using it for. But obviously, if I need more dynamic range, I am going to have to move back to my Sonys, and that's the beauty of what I'm actually doing, is that I can actually use both systems. Like I said, I'm not getting rid of either camera, so I've got the benefit of being able to use the Sony system as well as the Panasonic GH5, so I'm in a sort of unique scenario there. Another thing too, where this does also have a little bit of an advantage over the Sony a6500 with the Vlog, is you can actually put the LUTs, and you can see the LUTs in the camera. Now, there is a LUT that comes with the a6500. I don't think with the A7R2. The A7S2. I'm not sure in the A7R2, it could be there, I'm not sure, but I've never really used it because it's only a generic LUT for, I think it's the 702 profile or something like that. But this one here, I've got a LUT that I downloaded that matches the LUTs that I'm using to correct in Final Cut. So what I see on the back of this is basically the corrected version. Now that is a really, really good thing to have, because no longer am I looking at a very sort of matte type look if I'm using log, or even if I'm using, I know it doesn't work with the Cine, but it definitely works with the log profile, and it works great so that I'm no longer looking at this flat profile and I can see the color that I'm using and things like that, which helps with focus and everything else. So that's a real advantage as well. Another thing too is the focus transitions on this is incredible. I always have trouble pulling focus between two objects, and it is quite hard to pull focus, especially with the fly-by-wire, which it is on most of the Sony and the Panasonic lenses, and it can be quite hard to rack focus between two objects. This has an amazing feature inside that does it for you, and all you have to do is program it and then click on the actual back of the screen and it will rack focus beautifully between the two objects, and there's no basically focusing back and forth because you've already preset it in manual focus, so there's no hunting involved, which also works amazing as well. So I'm really, really happy with how that works, and I'll be using that an awful lot between going to, say, from the flowers to the bride, doing things like that when I'm doing the weddings and stuff like that, which is going to be great as well. Another thing is there's no crop on this as compared to what the GH4 was, so this is the full readout on this sensor, which is much better. I mentioned the dual slots. After I've been using the A9, that is such a comfort that I no longer have to worry about it, I suppose. I've never had a car go wrong, and I've said that before, and I never really cared much about it, but now that I've got it, it sort of is a bit of a relief off my mind. Now that I've got it, I think, but I never worried about it before. But this does have the dual card slots like the A9, so that is also a really big advantage as well. So let's have a look at what's not so good. So obviously the focus on this, if you're talking about autofocus, is not very good at all. So that's another reason why I'll be using my A6500. If I'm using it on a gimbal, I'll be using this on the gimbal that I've got, because I've got a KMTV gimbal. So when I'm running this on a gimbal, I'll always be running my A6500 on that, because it does have amazing autofocus. Now, having manual focus doesn't bother me at all. I've found the focus peaking on the GH5 is much more accurate than what it is on the Sony system. So the manual focus for the GH5 is actually really easy to do. So I'm not worried about that at all. It's something that doesn't bother me. And also, because of the crop factor, you have to worry about the focus less anyway, because remember, if you're shooting this at 2.8, it's actually the equivalent of around about a 5.6 on a full frame camera. And again, if you were focusing at 5.6, there's much more that's in focus than what there would be if you're shooting at, say, a 1.8 or 1.4 lens on full frame. So they are a lot easier to focus, but the focus peaking is definitely much better. Another downside is a depth of field. You can't get the depth of field natively out of this. Now, you can apparently if you use a speed booster. I haven't gone down that avenue yet. I will, but at this stage I'm just staying native with the native lenses, but I believe if you use a speed booster and you can put the Canon lenses on or whatever, you do get that full depth of field, and you also gain the low light ability as well, so that would stop you having to push up the ISO a lot more. So I suppose you could say definitely the autofocus is a problem. Now, that's because it's basically contrast. They're not running the same focusing as, say, the Sony cameras are, so the contrast doesn't work. But Panasonic are saying that they're going to release a firmware update that's going to improve the focusing incredibly well. Let's see that. The interesting thing is, if you're using this for photography, it's incredibly fast. So when you're shooting photos on this, the actual autofocus is super quick. It's really, really quick. So if they can sort of get that to work the same way for the autofocus, it would be incredible. I've found, though, what's a really interesting thing about how this works is that you can actually program it so that you're in manual focus, but I can still touch the back of the screen and use the autofocus. So I can touch it on the back, it grabs autofocus, then immediately goes into manual focus and I can move it. It's similar to DHF in, I think it's DHF, on the Sony systems, or DMF, whatever it's called on the Sony systems. But it works really, really well, and I'm using that all the time now. The touchscreen is much more responsive on this. The touchscreen is really usable on this, and it's incredibly responsive. So it's great for when you're using it for focus and things like that and getting through the menus. I don't understand why the Sony systems don't give you that ability when Sony make mobile phones. Clearly it's going to happen, it's just a matter of time, but that definitely is better on the Panasonic side. Like I said, the dynamic range is only 12 stops, so if dynamic range was going to be an issue, well then again I could go back to the Sony cameras, so it's not an issue for me. And I've tried doing balancing the colours, and I can match them very, very close using the process that I'm doing in Final Cut, which I'll show you eventually anyway. Yeah, I'm matching them fairly close, so I'm sure that no bride is going to tell the difference when I'm swapping between both cameras, so that's not an issue. The other thing I've found too is if you're using a really wide angle lens on this, that you can get a bit of wobbling when you're shooting wide open with the IBIS, and it's probably the IBIS that's causing that. But that's only when you're shooting really, really wide open. But once you slow it down, you don't see it anymore anyway. So yeah, so that's basically what I wanted to talk to you about the camera itself. And we'll look at the A6500 now, and I'll talk to you about the benefits of that. Just let me say, looking up here, someone has said it's DMF. Yeah, it is, and I use DMF quite a lot on the Sony system. That works great as well. It's a very similar system to what the Panasonic's got. The main difference really between the two of them is the GH5, the focus peaking is much better than what the Sony system is. I've noticed it's much more accurate. The focus peaking on the Sonys can be a little bit out. Sometimes I've turned the focus peaking off and just used it without that, just because of that reason. What else? So we've got Three Trees Photography has said, the A9 doesn't allow you to program rack focus. No, it doesn't. No, not like this does, no. This is amazing how the racking focus is actually programmed. It's really, really good. So let's look at the Sony a6500 now, where I'll be using this. Well, clearly if we were talking about photos, I'd be using this all the time. This is not bad. The GH5 gives you actually quite good images, and I'm going to do, just for the sake of it, I'm actually going to do a full-on shoot with this with flash and everything, so I'm going to show you the type of results that you can get out of the GH5. So if you are interested in seeing that, I'm not going to make it a paid shoot because I wouldn't want to do that to a client, but I'm going to grab a girl, a beautiful model, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to use the GH5 just to see what I can get using it in a full-on fashion type shoot. So I'll let you know how that goes when I post that. But to be honest, if ever I'm shooting photos, I'm going to be using the A6500 if I'm talking about using these two cameras. The A6500, the focus is incredible. I mean, it is really amazing on this. The continuous focus is just awesome on this camera. This has 6K photos on it, which actually, when you pull the photo off, is a really, really good photo. But the issue with it is it doesn't have autofocus when you're doing that. You have to focus manually, so that can be a bit of an issue. But I'd still be using this if I'm talking about for photography. This is far better for video, I think, at this stage, apart from low light and focusing. But this is definitely better for your photography. Also, I'll be using this on a gimbal. Whenever I'm using my gimbal, I'm going to be using this on the Came TV that I have, the gimbal, because this will work on autofocus. I really don't want to put on manual focus when I'm running around doing something on a gimbal, because I don't want to have to rely on that. I want to be able to just stick it on there, stick it on autofocus, and basically let it go. And I can trust this. I can trust this to keep in focus. So that's another real advantage with this as well. Another big advantage with this is also the depth of field. So the depth of field is definitely better than what I'm getting through the GH5. Now, like I said, you can probably get over that if you're using the Canon glass and a speed booster on it, but I'm just talking about it as the cameras on their own. This is much better. This is also clearly better in ISO. I can shoot 6400 on this easily, and it's still really quite good. So the ISO on the Sony cameras are much, much better. So again, I'm in the unique process. Okay, I've got the unique ability to, when I'm doing the reception, if it is very dark, I can stop using the GH5 if it's an issue with ISO, and I can start using my Sony systems. I've got the A7R2, I've got this, and I've also got the A9. So I can start to use those if there's an issue with low light. But this clearly is much, much better when you're dealing with ISO. Things that aren't as good. Clearly, the screen is nowhere near as good as what I've got with the Panasonic. I wish this had an articulating screen. Why don't they give you the ability to pull that screen out? It just frustrates the hell out of me. Sony, if you're listening to this, give us an articulating screen. I'll buy that camera tomorrow. So I'm hoping the new A6-700, whenever it's released, has that. Perhaps the new A7 III may have that, I don't know. But the screen is much better on the Panasonic. The colours on this, the brightness on this is much worse than what the GH5 has, because when you're shooting 4K, it dims way down. I don't understand that. It may be because of overheating. That brings me to another thing. I haven't had this overheat, but I've always been conscious of it, whereas apparently these are bulletproof. They will not overheat. So that now is a good thing, because if I'm doing a long reception or long wedding ceremony, I had to have someone basically standing by their camera just to turn it off, because I was always a bit worried in case if it did overheat, and I had to use external batteries and everything else because of that. I was making sure that it didn't overheat, and I didn't have it overheat because I was pulling the back screen out. I used an external battery and it didn't. But with this, you don't have to worry about that. So that's another advantage with this, is I'm not going to have to worry about this overheating at all. So that is an advantage. The other thing is the battery life on this clearly sucks compared to what this is. This is just terrible compared to this. This will go, like I say, around about 2.5 hours. This only goes for around about an hour. So there's a big difference in the battery life compared to the two. Ergonomics, I quite like both cameras. I'm not worried about the ergonomics. The controls on this are a little bit better because you have many more buttons that you can program. So that's much better in that respect. But, I do still love this camera. This is probably one of my favourite cameras I've ever used, the A6500. The video, 4K video, is amazing. It's beautiful. It's really, really sharp, really, really sharp. The IBIS works quite well. It's not fantastic, but it does help. It's nowhere near as good as what the GH5 is, but the downside is this doesn't do 4K 60p, so that is a bit of an issue for me if I want to slow down that footage as well. Just let me go up to some of the questions to see what some people are saying here. RY Yurma said, I've heard the AF is terrible, but the AF for stills is incredibly fast. And that's so true. The autofocus on this camera for stills is amazing. It's actually really, really quick. I was surprised when I tried it how fast it actually is for stills. Also, the low light focusing on this is amazing as well. And I think it's down to -3 or 4. EV, and that's because I think it's that contrast detection. So it does work in incredibly low light, but the autofocus continuous for video is terrible. It's barely usable, and I'm trying to go through some settings to see if it's okay. But when you compare it to what I get for this, the A6500 kills it. It's not even in the ballpark. So you do really have to use this with manual focus if you're going to use this for video. But like I said, the focus peaking for this is so good that it's not an issue using it in manual focus. Let's see what 3 Tree Photography said. I was interested in the GH5 before people started showing the autofocus problems. And like I said, I don't think that's going to be a problem for me, 3 Trees Photography, though. The manual focus is amazing. M Squeeze said, 3 Trees, go watch Max Ura's video comparison. The 4K focus is not very good on the GH5, and it's not. Yeah, it's terrible if you compare it to the Sony. It's awful. David Johnson said, true, but the speed booster is another $650 and it will give you one stop of light. That's true, and you do have to pay that, and that's why I haven't bought that at this stage. I'm going to see how I go with these lenses. This is the 1.7. I also bought this is the equivalent to an 85mm. It's the 42. I'll just switch to this other camera. This is the a 42.5 1.7, and I've also bought the 42. I think it's the 42 or the 40. 25. No, it's the 25 1.4 lens as well. And I'll probably get is it the Midgon? I think there's some funny Chinese name that has a 0.95 lens as well. So I'm probably going to get that as well. I may get a couple of those for really low light focusing. So I'll see how it goes, but the lenses are so small. We'll go back to questions again. Kevin said, what do you attach to your cage? That's talking about this. Well, I actually attach I've got the Shogun. I've got a Shogun that I actually attach, and I also want to get the small HD focus that I'm actually going to attach onto this. I just like it because basically it gives you a little bit more to hold on when you're doing video. And it does give me the option to, when I've got microphones added on and things like that, that I've got extra things to attach on there. I only actually put the cage on though when I'm shooting video. If I'm not shooting video, I don't really use the cage at all. I'll keep it small. So if I'm using it just for photos, like when I'm doing weddings and I'm not doing video, I'll take the cage off. So that's the reason why I've got the cage on at the moment, because I actually had a Shogun attached to it. And like I said, I am going to buy the small HD focus, and I'll be using that on both cameras. I'll get a cage for this as well. Let's see what else. Three Trees said the screen on the A6500 would have you believe you ruined a shot until you get it to the computer. Yeah, it's not very good. I found it's okay for photos. It's actually quite good for photos. But it's more the 4K is the issue. It's terrible for the 4K. The way that dims, and it dims substantially, you cannot see that outside at all. I found it's fine for photos. Gilbert said, good day from Lancashire, England. Hi, Gilbert. How are you, mate? Three Trees said the A7R2 gives you a great example reference of the shots and video you take on internal playback. Yeah, I think it does, but I don't think you can put in the manual LUTs though on that. Not like you can on this one, I don't think. But I'll have to check it. I'm not sure, but it works amazingly on the GH5. Yummy Tech said, how about ISO for stills? Well, again, it's nowhere near as good as what I'm getting for the Sonys. Like I said, to be honest, if I'm doing stills, there's no way known I'm going to be using the Panasonic. I'm going to be using the GH5. The A6500, if we're talking about these two together. But like I said, I've only done minor tests at this stage, so I'll do full-on tests, and I'll give you that in my channel here, so you're going to see how this works when I do it. Because like I said, I'm going to go and do a professional shoot with it, and I'll be using my Profoto light, so I'm going to go full-on professional to see how good I can get the Panasonic to actually work. So I'll let you know when we do it, and you'll see it actually on there, so I'll let you know. But again, I can't see me using this for stills. I only bought this for the video. I may sometimes go on holidays and just take this if I want to just shoot video and stills. That may be a good travel option, I'm not sure. Again, though, this is hard to beat for travel because it's so small. This is going to be hard to beat overall for my favourite little camera, but we'll have to see when I test it a little bit more. But like I said, when I do that shoot, I'll give you the full analysis of ISO for stills. But if we're talking about video, the Sony, the A6500 kills it. You know what? I've used the A7S II, and I honestly think that this is not. I wouldn't be buying the A7S II. I'd be buying this over the A7S II unless you want to be working in pitch blackness. Because this A6500 is amazing. It's an amazing little camera for what it does. And like I say, the ISO is usable up to 6400, even a bit higher if you need to. And you can use noise reduction in your editing software. But the ISO on this little camera is incredible. And the focus is much better than the A7S II, etc. Like I said, I wouldn't be buying an A7S II now. I'd be buying this instead. What else? Gilbert TV said, good to catch you, David, at 6:37 in the UK. I normally miss your live shows. I know he's from Brisbane, up north, so he is watching me live from the UK. So they're the main things that I sort of wanted to talk to you about at this stage. Clearly, as we go on, you'll start to see me shooting with both of them, and I'll be able to show you sort of how they work together. Like I said, I will also do that shoot with the full-on professional shoot with the Panasonic. I just want to show that to you, how it works. It won't be a paid shoot for the person because I wouldn't do that, but because I'd be using my Sony, to be honest. But I will do it for you to see how it actually works. And so the people who are using the Panasonic GH5 can see how it will work being used in a professional scenario, because I'll treat it as a full-on professional shoot. Yummy Tech, thanks for the ISO opinion. Yeah, so that's Thanks for that, mate. Kevin said, you're always very nice commenting on my photos on the Jason Lanier Facebook group. Thank you so much for the encouragement. Thanks a lot, mate. Yeah, thanks for saying that. And thanks for watching me here too. Three Trees Photography said the A6500 is a pretty awesome machine. Just watching people's videos on YouTube, it is. I think by far this is the best value for money camera you can buy at the moment. If you're talking about stills and also video, this is by far the best value for money. If you're talking about video for the moment though, this is by far, I think, the best video camera on the market for its cost. So if you're dealing with video only, the GH5 is way ahead of what I can get from if you take out the ISO and the autofocus. But if you're talking about overall features and everything that's involved in these cameras, the dual card slots, the amazing back LCD screen, the articulating screen, the dual card slots I've said already, the buttons that you can program, the focus peaking. This is by far the best video camera I think that's out there. And that's a reason why I'm excited about using this for my wedding videos to come. There's obviously no way this is going to overheat either, because they're built like a tank, and also the waterproofing, basically weather sealing, is another big feature. But like I said, for an overall camera that does everything, you can't beat this A6500. David said the 4K video is actually better in the A6300, A6500, just for the fact that it's taking 6K video and downsampling it versus the A7S II does. Yeah, and that is a thing. The videos that I've seen taken from that, I agree with that. The 4K video is better from the A6500. It's only the low light is a little bit less from the A7S II as compared to the A6500. So that's the difference at this stage, but the focusing sucks on the A7S II as well. So, like I said, I wouldn't be buying that. I'd be waiting until Sony update to an A7S III or an A9S, whatever they want to call it. That's going to be the camera for video, and that's the one I'll be excited about. But that's probably not going to come out till next year, and I just can't wait any longer. So that's why I bought the GH5, because it fits my need at this stage, and that's the thing that matters for me. I have to have a camera that works. So this is definitely not a Sony versus Panasonic thing or a flaming anyone, because I'm going to be using both of these. So, I love both of them. I love technology. I am a geek in that respect. Having two systems doesn't really worry me at all. The systems are quite close enough that I can get by using both. So I'm not worried about that aspect of it. And I can also match the color profiles. So that's another thing as well that I'm quite happy about. Gilbert said, I need to try the video on my A6500. I do stills mainly. Yeah, you should, mate, because the video on this is incredible. It's so good. If you watch Wedding Film Skills, the live show that they had on today, he was talking about he's just bought the A6500. He's thinking about selling his A7S II as well. So a lot of people are moving over, White Revelry, I think it's called. He's moved over from his Sony systems and gone completely to the GH5. I think they're called White and Revelry. I like following them as well. They're amazing wedding videographers, and they've completely switched over to the GH5 for their video. But see, unlike me, I'm doing both, so I can't switch to one or the other. I have to be doing both because my main priority is still photography, and I'm having Fusion as an extra. So for me, the Sony is still going to be where it's at for me completely. But this is just a video option for me that I can use to sort of give me that video, that 4K 60p that I need, and that slow motion that I need. Because I found even if I'm going 1080p, the 120 slow motion on this is incredible. It's much better than what I've used on the Sony cameras. Although the A9 does give really good 120p slow motion, so I have to do a test between the two of them. But yeah. I think it's Baha said, good morning from London. G'day, mate. How are you? Like I said, now, if you're watching this later on, clearly it's very late for most people, but if you are watching this later on, please leave your comments down below, because I'd love you to get in and chime about what you think about both of these systems. I don't want this to be a slamming Sony or GH5 thing. I hate this sort of thing about, one's better than the other. I think these are both great systems for what they are, and I've sort of tried to give it to you how I'm going to use them both for my business. And I suppose, unlike a lot of people who switch completely, there's no way that I'm going to be doing that, because like I said, I still need the Sonys for the stills, and also for that continuous focus on things like gimbals and stuff. And the GH5 will be nearly used just for video solely. And I still will be using the Sonys for video as well. Gilbert said, I'm off to Blackpool today for the Punk Festival, so I might give that a video a go as well. That's cool, mate. You'll love it. Blackpool was cool when I was there. So, like I said, leave some questions down below because I'd love you to give me your opinion about this, and let me know if you are using the GH5 or whether you've switched from the Panasonic to the Sony or whether you've gone the other way. I'd love to get in discussions with you about that as well, because clearly we can't do that in the chat over there. So, yeah, guys, throw in some questions now. Let's have a bit of question time. So let's see what you think, or, I'm just curious to see what you guys think about what's happening here. Like I said, I've tried to give you... there is another thing that I'd love to tell you about too, because I wish Sony would do this. The wireless app on the GH5 is incredible. When you use this on the app on the iPhone, and I suppose it must be the same too for the Samsung phones and everything else, you have complete full control over what you do, like everything. There's full focus controls. You can set ISO, aperture, shutter speed, white balance. I mean, the Sony app's not bad, but this is insane how much control you've actually got of this. You can even, and I never mentioned it too, this has waveforms. It also has vector scopes. It has all these amazing things that help you with your exposure. You can also use them on iPhone apps, which really help when you're trying to nail your exposure, especially when you're doing log profiles, which can be so flat, because then exposure is so critical. So the exposure on this and the way the Wi-Fi works is incredible. It's so much more advanced than what Sony has. So again, Sony, if you're watching this, it's about time you update those camera apps, because clearly the Panasonic is the way to go. And I will show that in a video so you can sort of see how they vary between the two of them. Let us see what said. Pete said, any issues with the rolling shutter on the A6500? Yes, the GH5 is much better on the rolling shutter, much better with rolling shutter than what the Panasonic, than what the Sony is. The Sony A6500 is terrible. The A9 is much better, so they have improved the rolling shutter on the A9. It's still not as good, though, as what you're getting with the Panasonic. So if you're dealing with rolling shutter, this is way better. Again, this is a much better video camera than what this is, and that's why I said that. If you're dealing with just video cameras, this is way better. And I forgot rolling shutter. This is a much better fusion camera of having stills and video together. David said, true, but you are working with the bigger sensor as the Sony, and that will make a difference. Are you talking about rolling shutter and stabilization? And that's the problem. You are. Because this is a much smaller sensor, obviously this has to push much more data through, and that's why you've got much more rolling shutter, and there's less stabilization that's there. Ferg said, I'm about to buy the A6500. Thanks to share your experience. True opinion. Greeting from Mexico. And like I said, there's no right or wrong here. Like I said, if you are in stills, Ferg, I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce your name, I would be buying the A6500 definitely. If you're just dealing with video, I would be buying this one at the moment. If you're dealing with video and stills, I'd be buying the A6500. That's just my opinion at this stage. Keylight said, would love to see the GH5 photo shoot. So much online is all about the video, very little about photo. Yeah, that's why I'm going to do that, because I thought it might be really interesting for you. Even though most of my work is still going to be Sony, I'm sure the Sony people will get a bit of a kick out of watching me do that on the GH5 as well. So that's going to be interesting for you guys too, to see how it works as well. Remember, no matter what you think, guys, it's mostly not the gear that matters, it's you that matters. And that's the thing, it's your technique and your ability to get a good photo. So really, the gear doesn't really matter at all, but I'm just curious to see how it handles it with flash and things like that and focus. So yeah, I'll certainly bring that to you soon. Studat saying, mate, David, you're making me cry. Why is that? Because I've got the GH5? Studat, just let me know. That's curious. I think it probably is, because I saw him here in Melbourne and he was really raving about his A6500. Like I said, don't feel bad. Your A6500 is still amazing, and I still love mine to death. Keylight Digital said, I'm torn between the X-T2 and the A6500. If I had the choice between those two cameras, I've only used the X-T2 in a shop, so I haven't used it that much, but I'd still get the A6500 because I think it's a much better overall camera if you're talking about video and things. That's just myself personally. If you're a Fuji person, you'll totally probably disagree with me. But I'm just talking about it from my perspective. I would prefer the A6500 than the XT2. The controls on the XT2, though, are much better, much better. I love the controls on that XT2. Three Trees Photography said, I think we're about due to see a new A6500 replacement. And you know what? I'm hoping so. I'd love an A6700 to come out. And I'm just hoping it does have that fully articulating screen and, 4K 60p. Oh, it'd be amazing. I really do hope that comes out. It's not going to be this year, though. What colour profile do you like on the GH5? There's a couple that I'm using at the moment, the natural profile, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, and I'm also doing the flat profile. If you are interested, though, I'll tell you how I've got my natural profile set just for the GH5 people. The photo profile, I'm using natural, and I found the skin tones look really, really nice. I'm using -5 on the contrast, saturation's -3, noise reduction's down to -4, and I think it's the saturation is -2 and the hue is -1. So if you want to set those, that's the natural profile I'm using. I also will be using Cinelike D and also the Vlog as well. Basically the same as what I'm using on my A6500. The main profiles I'm using on the A6500 are, if I bring this one up, I haven't got the battery in, I can't tell you. I think it was just a standard profile on here as well that I'm using, and also the log profile I use a lot on the A6500 as well. I've just bought a bit of, if you look back, I've just put a Final Cut Pro color thing that I just did the other day, and it shows this new one that I'm doing, this Needham log profiles that I'm using. I've just bought the Sony one, and I'm using the GH5 one, and it's incredible how easy it is to balance. So I'll show that, and they work well with both cameras. Let me come back here. David said the XT2 doesn't have an articulated screen. Yeah, and that's another, it just does my head in why these companies aren't doing that. Soren said, you are right, I'm a Fuji person and I agree with you. It's as an overall camera, I'd say that this is definitely better. I just like the Sony system better than what the Fuji system does. The ergonomics are much better with the Fuji, but the video side of it is much better on the Sonys. Stuart said the GH5, it's un-Australian. That's because I've got the GH5 and not. I haven't got rid of my Sony A6500, Stuart. So you're still right, mate. And Siren said neither does the A6500, and that's the main reason. Why I went and got the GH5, because I love that articulating screen when I'm doing the vlogging. It's great to see yourself. David Johnson said, more than the Fuji. Soren said the main advantage Fuji has over the Sony is the lineup of APS-C lenses. Yeah, that's the thing. But you know what? In some ways, I've never had an issue with lenses because I'm lucky. I've got the full frame lenses and the APS-C lenses. So if I need to, I use my full frame lenses on the A6500 anyway, and they work really, really well on the A6500. So I'm comfortable with the amount of lenses that Sony have. So I'm not really worried about that. It's by far got enough lenses for what I'd like to use anyway. Clearly, though, the Fuji has such a massive range of lenses. But like I said, Sony have way more than what I need. So I'm comfortable with all the lenses that Sony have. And he's also, David's saying, Fuji have more, but they're definitely more expensive. I can't comment on that because I haven't bought Fuji lenses, so I'm not sure about how much they are. But like I said, you can use all the full-frame lenses, and I use them all the time on my A7S, A6500. And, I'll use the 70-200 on this F4. I'm using the Zeiss Batis on here. Etc., etc. And I even use the APS-C lenses on my full frame, because this lens here, for instance, this is the 10 to 18 millimeter lens. I can put this lens on my A7R2 and it gives me 12 millimeter to 16 without any of the vignette on the outside. So it's a really, really wide lens on there. So if my 16 to 35 is not wide enough, I'll use this on my A7R2 or the full frame lenses, because I can use this at 12 millimeter. Very, very wide, and it works amazing. So you can use them. What else have we got here? Three Trees said, seems like a little warehouse cameras all have the awesome articulating screen. Sharon said, fair point, FE lenses are a good option if you can live with the crop factor. Yeah, they are, and that's the thing, you have to understand there is that crop factor there. Like I said, I haven't got to worry with that, and like I said, that lens works amazing as well, and it's great if you need the reach. So, you know, if I'm using the 70 to 200, well, then you get this massive reach when you put that on your A6500. So it can be an advantage using the full frame lenses on there. So, you know, it's really, really good. And the A7R2, if I use them on there, you get about an 18 megapixel file size because it goes into APS-C mode automatically, or Super 35, which is really, really good. And if I'm shooting video on the A7R or the A9 with these lenses, it immediately goes into Super 35 mode, so you can use those lenses without an issue as well. So, you know, it's a great option. What else? David said, a good friend of mine owns the Fuji X-T2 and loves it, but for what he shoots, which is sports and portraits, he has definitely spent more on primes and telephoto lenses, and that's on the Fuji X-T2, yeah. And like I said, I'm mostly primes now. I use that more now than zooms, and I do love that. But I've just bought the 12 to 35 on the Panasonic. This is the F2 version, the 2.8. Sorry, yeah, it's the version 2 version, and it's a really, really good lens. So it's equivalent to a 70 to 2470 on the full frame. But this is really quite good. Plus, the stabilization is insane on this. So that's the reason why I'm using that as a zoom. But like I said, I've bought this 85mm equivalent 42.5, and also the 25 as well, which gives you a 50mm on it. So I'll get something that's a 35mm and something wide as well. What else have we got? I get serious purple fringing. Oh, this is Three Trees Photography said, I get serious purple fringing on an A6500 with the FE55. Oh, I don't get that. That's interesting. Perhaps I've got a good copy. You've got a bad copy. Yeah, mine's great on both cameras. I love it. I've put a couple of videos actually on that, and I showed that being used the other day. It's amazing. I love that lens. Keylight Digital said the 17 to 14 on Pani is awesome. Oh, that's another, yeah, different wide lens. There's lots, and the good thing is these lenses are so cheap, you know, really cheap, $300 or something, $400, really, really cheap, and that's another big advantage too. So unless there's any other questions, guys, we might finish, because it's, how long have we been on? I don't know. A while. Nearly an hour. So let me know, like I said, let me know down below if you do have any other questions that we haven't touched on. If you think that I've missed something, or if you wanted to voice your opinion about this, I'll be really interested to see what you have to say about this. And I always answer my questions personally, so let me know. Richard said, hi David, I just bought the A6500 with the FE85 1.8. Thanks to you, and they're great. Great setup. The 85 1.8 is an amazing lens for its price. And yeah, thanks for saying you bought it, because I recommend it, Richard. It's a great combo. Like I said, I love my A6500. It's an amazing combo. Best, like I said, the best all-around camera that you can buy at the moment. There's no doubt about that at all. Richard said the 85 1.8 is an amazing lens, and it isn't. It's cheap. It's really cheap. I think it's $600 US or some ridiculous figure, and it's super sharp, super sharp. It's nice and light. It's a great lens. If I hadn't got the Batis 85, I'd be buying that lens as well. All right, guys. Well, we might call it a day. So I'll see you again soon for my next video. And if you can, like I said, please give me a thumbs up, and let me know if you have any questions. Like I said, I always answer them. And I'd love you too to get into this community and talk to each other, like in the comments as well. I always make sure that whenever we answer, I try and answer them as soon as possible, but I do always answer them personally, because I hate YouTube providers where they don't answer the people that are in there. I hate that. I just never want to be like that. I always want to have the time to answer to you guys. So please leave me some questions down below, some thoughts and opinions about it all, because it'll be interesting to see what you guys think about it as well. Yeah, so that's about it. All right, guys, so bye for now, and enjoy the rest of your evening or night or early morning, whatever it is, or your day if you're in the UK. I'm going to go and have a nice coffee, I think. So that's all for now, guys. Catch you later for the next video, and g'day from Australia. Bye.